Hi there, welcome to another edition of The Broken Promised Land. Today we're going to talk about the shaping ceasefire and the reactions to it. So there's really a lot to get to. Uh, the two major things that happened today were Trump posted the line to which Israel is expected to withdraw when the hostages are released. That line includes Israel withdrawing from a few strategic areas and from where it's gone into Gaza City, but it would leave 70% of Gaza in its hands when it does so. Hamas, it appears, will not agree to that line and will try to move it somewhat backwards. But either way, it won't matter much. Israel will be controlling the vast majority of Gaza as the hostages are released. That, of course, places Hamas in a very difficult position. They're concerned that once the hostages are released, Israel will renew the attack on Gaza, renew the genocide in Gaza, and will have no more leverage to stop it. And it's really not clear what sort of guarantees Trump can offer in order to ameliorate that concern. And we'll talk a little bit about what's going on inside Hamas right now. So that's really the weak spot of what's going on right now as far as Hamas is concerned. Trump's aware of that, but he's trying to get through it through threats. He said, I will not tolerate delay, which many think will happen, or any outcome where Gaza poses a threat again. Let this be done quickly. Everyone will be treated fairly. And he warned that all bets will be off if hostages are not quickly released. And of course, there certainly has been historically a threat from Gaza to Israel, but the threat from Israel to Gaza has proven to be much more severe. There's been many more casualties in Gaza, and it's not clear what is going to guarantee the security of Gaza. There will be an international force brought in, according to the plan. It's not exactly sure when. That will take time to occur. Also, Hamas will have objections to what countries are in it. Israel will probably have objections to what countries are in it. That will take a long time of haggling if it ever happens at all. So that's really what I see as the major sticking point right now. Netanyahu made a statement, a taped statement, no allowance for questions from journalists, of course, God forbid. And it was relatively optimistic. There was two ways he could go about this. One was to try to undermine it in some tricky way, and the other was to try to sell it to the public. Now, there was some undermining going on. I'll talk about that in a second, but mostly the speech was selling it to the public. That's a very good sign in terms of him accepting the fact that he's going to have to move towards a ceasefire, or at least very much appear like he's moving towards a ceasefire. He said he hopes to announce the return of all hostages during Sukkot, which is an upcoming holiday. The Israeli negotiation team is on its way to Egypt, and on Monday, talks there will resume. The first time there have been serious talks in a very long time. These should be the most serious talks that have taken place in months. The next stage will involve disarming Hamas, demilitarizing Gaza diplomatically or militarily. Netanyahu also echoed Trump's warning, which is probably a warning that Netanyahu asked Trump to make to begin with, of what will happen to Hamas if they delay the release of the hostages in any way. He also said that Hamas will be destroyed militarily or diplomatically after the release of the hostages, which is exactly what Hamas is concerned about. So that feeds into their fears, which might lead to a delay. That was his attempt, I think, to try to undermine the deal. He's hoping that he can compel Hamas to break the deal, perhaps, and then take advantage of that to continue the war and the genocide with Trump's support. But he's not doing that as openly as he's done in the past, because Trump really seems to have put his credibility behind this deal. Another relatively positive development, I guess it depends how you look at it, is that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who couldn't respond for 24 hours because it was Shabbat when this was announced, which was a clever ploy by Trump, I believe, came out against the deal. Of course, there was no chance that they wouldn't, but neither one has said that they will immediately leave the government. They said they may reconsider that in the future. Definitely a best case scenario for Netanyahu. Smotrich accepts the first stage of Trump's plan. Ben-Gvir warned that he will leave government if Hamas remains after the hostage release. So the release of hostages isn't their major problem. Their main problem is the move towards a Palestinian state. That is something that, of course, they can't stay in the government for, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So the road has been paved for Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, for all their bluster, to actually remain in the government until elections occur. Because if elections are called, it'll be a few months in the future when elections actually occur. Elections have to occur by October 2026. So that's a year from now. There's just 9 months really to run out until the natural expiration date of this government. It's starting to look increasingly likely that that's going to happen. Meanwhile, the IDF is also preparing for a ceasefire, which is another very good sign. They released tens of thousands of reservists currently fighting in Gaza as the IDF transitioned to a defensive position in the Strip, a sign that the IDF, too, believes there's going to be a ceasefire, and that will give some much-needed rest for the soldiers as far as they're concerned. They're reinforcing defenses and communication systems in Gaza to prevent attacks or kidnapping. When you're in occupied territory and you're not on offense, you're very vulnerable. And they're concerned that Hamas will take advantage of that. I doubt that Hamas would try anything too daring with Trump's eyes on them, but you never know. They could try to use that for something. Another problem is that last time they tried to kidnap soldiers, they failed. And if they fail, they're going to get the worst of all possible worlds, the wrath of Trump and a lack of any tactical success. Now, the Wall Street Journal had a fascinating story about the divisions inside Hamas. They really got the scoop on that. And it appears that, as usual, Hamas is divided between Hamas abroad and Hamas in Gaza. The political leaders in Qatar and outside Gaza lean toward acceptance. Gaza's military commanders are resisting disarmament and the release of hostages. They believe that they can survive the onslaught of the IDF. Gaza-based Hamas leader Ezzadin El-Haddad has said that he's open to compromise on heavy weapons, but wants to keep small arms for defense. So they don't want a full disarmament, they want a partial disarmament. A lot of the fighters may refuse to disarm. They might use those arms to gain aid, for local control, for power. They also might fear losing leverage and independence vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority once they come in. And Hamas military leaders don't like the lines that Trump drew and will try to get them to move somewhat. There's the main difference between the two is that Hamas abroad, they are more concerned about the broader diplomatic ramifications of saying no, like losing ties with Qatar, losing ties with Egypt, while Hamas in Gaza are looking specifically at the military situation, which they don't believe is as dire as others are painting it. A lot of the Hamas fighters in Gaza remain focused on the war and are planning guerrilla attacks on the IDF. So this push and pull within Hamas will be interesting to see. It looks right now overall like Hamas abroad is winning this battle, making a lot of concessions, but we'll see which way this goes. The deciding factor in that, I believe, will be what guarantees can Qatar and the United States provide Hamas that Israel will not just take the hostages and renew the attacks on them. As far as Israel is concerned, they believe that this agreement works for them in the sense that they get the hostages immediately, and Hamas doesn't receive any of the benefits, the Palestinians don't receive any of the benefits for a long time, which gives them an opportunity to torpedo it. So right now, Israel is in the driver's seat. Israel stands to benefit more from this. But in the long term, if the Palestinians can make this work for them, they stand to gain more. So that's the game that we have here. And that's why Israel has the incentive to derail this whole process after the hostages are released. So I'll keep updating on what happens here. People have accused me of not being objective or whatever. What I want here is a ceasefire to succeed, and I want the bloodshed to stop, and I want the hostages to be released. And hopefully that's what you want as well. So if you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media. Consider listening to my Histories of the Holy Land podcast. I'll be putting out a new episode, I believe, on Monday. And subscribing to my Grand Scheme Substack. I'm going to put all those links here at the bottom. And I'm going to see you all again very soon.